When you need a car, truck or van, who you gonna call? What? Oh, that's not the Ghostbusters theme? Silly me. If you know, you know. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today I'm so excited to finally talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife, which hits theaters this weekend. A huge thank you to Sony Pictures for giving me the chance to see this in person for review, and yes, I'm very proud of myself, guys. I watched the original Ghostbusters for the first time earlier this week. Okay, maybe I shouldn't be so proud. The movie's directed by Jason Reitman, who is the son of Ivan Reitman, who directed the original Ghostbusters, and it's starring Mckenna, Finn Wolfhard, Carrie, Coon, and Paul Rudd. Now, the film itself has an interesting premise. I do like that they make connections to the past while still staying relevant in the present. So let's dive into the story just a little bit if you're unfamiliar with what Ghostbusters Afterlife is about. Trevor, Phoebe, and their mother Callie move to Somerville, where they try to uncover whatever one of the original Ghostbusters, who happens to actually be their father and grandfather respectively, was trying so hard to prevent from entering our world. When they discover what's about to happen, though, they become this town and the world's best chance for survival. I'm trying really hard to keep this spoiler free, of course, because this is a spoiler free review. So what I want to do is dive into some of what worked here. And if you're coming into this movie thinking, oh my gosh, I gotta watch the first and second Ghostbusters and the 2016 film, you really don't need to. You only need to watch the original, because from what I have been told, this movie has nothing to do with Ghostbusters 2. But okay, let's dive right into the positives, guys, and it starts with Mckenna. I absolutely loved her as Phoebe, who is the granddaughter of one of the original Ghostbusters. She's incredible in this role, you guys. I just loved her entire approach, from her dry humor to the very emotional and personal moments where she's able to express a ton of character. I mean, oh my goodness, there are some moments, including one in this basement, that just got me incredibly emotional. And hey, she even carries the film on her back in the second half too, but it is also her chemistry with the rest of the cast that's unmatched, including one friend that she makes. His name is Podcast, and this is at summer school where they meet, and Logan Kim, guys, is just so funny in this movie. But both Mckenna and Logan Kim are able to play off one another extremely well. Their pairing is the best pairing in this movie. And I'm also a big fan of Carrie Coon's performance as Callie, who they brought in as the mother, of course, to Trevor and Phoebe, but she's dealing with being jaded because her father, well, sort of abandoned her. So you have these awesome contrasts, right, where Phoebe's excited to learn more about her grandfather, Trevor is sort of off doing his own thing, and we'll talk more about Finn Wolfhard's performance later, and then you have Carrie Coon as Callie, who is definitely, she just doesn't care about her father because of how much her father didn't really care about her, or so we think. So this movie always kind of leaves you in the middle, and then you start to, of course, unravel the truth in the second half. And I say all that to say this: there's a lot of emotion here in Ghostbusters Afterlife during the very first hour that we didn't get at all in the original Ghostbusters. And that was important for me, because the original Ghostbusters, I thought, was a fun film, but it was lacking a lot of moments that grounded the movie. And here in Ghostbusters Afterlife, at least in the first half, there are a ton of moments like that. And honestly, another fun thing about this film is just seeing all the Easter eggs left around, whether it be in the background or the foreground, by director Jason Reitman. You can tell that he actually loves this film as if it were his own baby. He took some interest in leaving these little clues everywhere for us, and sometimes it's predictable to see where the story goes, and including that second half, which is definitely a carbon copy of the first movie's plot. But I really loved some of these clever Easter eggs throughout the movie. And speaking of directing, you guys, there are plenty of scenes here that are just incredibly fleshed out, and I mean that in a good way. One of them we already talked about a little bit, where Phoebe goes to the basement to discover more of her grandfather, and then you have other moments that are just charming and just so fun and engaging, like when Podcast and Phoebe go and try to capture their first ghost, when you hear the proton pack flick on, and then all the sound design just kind of comes together, and it made me smile. And if you are a big fan of the ghosts and the designs and visual effects here, I think you'll be pleased, because one of the ghosts that we meet early on, Muncher, who's actually voiced by Josh Gad, just looked great on screen. And I'll be honest, there are moments where the cinematography was pretty impressive, especially during the action sequences, so it just helps separate this movie from the original and make it its own thing at some points. And I also love the score by Rob Simonson. It just adds this eerie feel feel to the film that plays to the vintage feeling of the original while still remaining modern for today's age of filmmaking. And I think a lot of people will appreciate that. I know I did, where the movie still tries to pay homage to the original by giving off this 80s retro vibe at times, especially in the first half, but it still plays like a modern sequel because it is really a sequel in and of itself because it does follow the events of the first film. So I do think that it was a win in terms of feel, in terms of tone, and in terms of vibe. Oh, and if you are a mega fan of Ghostbusters, I think you're gonna really enjoy the fan service here. There's a lot of fan service. We'll talk about that later, but let's just say I think the second half you might want to bring some Kleenex because I had people around me crying. I heard them just crying during that last stretch for the film. But yes, I do think the fan service here is going to be something that a lot of these hardcore Ghostbusters fans enjoy even more than me. But okay, you guys, we just talked about what Ghostbusters Afterlife did well. Now let's talk about what it doesn't do so well. And it really starts with the second half of the movie, you guys. There's a clear drop-off point in terms of quality, pacing, and even enjoyment for me. During the first half, what worked really well for me was everything we just talked about, but in the second half, it is just a visual effects showcase, and some people might like that. Some people might want to see a ton of different visual effects on display, and there are times where they even dive into practical effects, which I loved, but it just got too much style and no substance. There's a lot of that heart and soul that is lost in the second half of the movie, and not even some great performances like from Paul Rudd, Carrie, Coon, and even Mckenna Grace can really salvage it. And it hurts me to say this, guys, but there are also not a lot of good performances outside of those that I literally just mentioned. I think that Finn Wolfhard was unfortunately miscast a little bit and maybe even misdirected because he doesn't even seem like he's acting naturally. He's given the most generic lines in this movie, and sadly his performance just didn't work for me. There's this romance they try to build between Trevor and Lucky, who's played by Celeste O'Connor, and Celeste O'Connor, don't get me started, y'all, they underused her like crazy in this movie. I think she has the chops. It just stinks that she wasn't really given that stage to really showcase her abilities in Ghostbusters Afterlife. But even the relationship they try to build between them two just never worked for me. It was awkward, but not in a good way. And it really is this last half of the movie that kind of exposes a lot of what doesn't work in Ghostbusters Afterlife. For me, the writing got a little lazy. They overused this bit of humor that worked in the first hour of the movie, where Mckenna Grace gives off these like terrible jokes, like Phoebe's saying some amazingly funny things, but it's just dry. It is not supposed to be funny, but it is. So I love the fact that they had that tinge of humor, but they overuse these jokes in the second half of the movie, and it just doesn't work. It literally wipes away all the goodwill that it earned in the first hour. And of course, they're trying their hardest to build up this new ragtag team of Ghostbusters. You have Phoebe, you have Podcast, Trevor, and Lucky. But the biggest issue for me is that it never really comes together. You feel it the most with Mckenna Grace's performance because I think she was the most natural out of everyone, but it's everyone else that I don't think necessarily fits into what they're trying to deliver, and that was just an issue for me as well, where nothing felt kind of like a gel together at the end when it probably should have. And guys, when I mentioned that fan service might work for those hardcore fans, it did not work too well for me. Let me be honest, it was laid on way too thick in that third act. We're getting to the finish line, or at least I thought we weren't, but you know, in retrospect we were getting to the finish line, and there's just way too much fan service. It takes away from everything that this film was trying to build up, and instead of just kind of adding it in a, I would say, in a minimalist way, they really overshadow everything that happens in the third act because of this fan service. So it wasn't really used creatively to me, it wasn't used effectively, and I thought that there were some questionable decisions down the line. I mean, I can't spoil anything, guys, but let's just say they make a choice that both kind of works, but ultimately I don't think it did anything but distract from that final sequence. But overall, you guys, Ghostbusters Afterlife really isn't a bad movie. With everything that I just said, I know I made it sound awful, but it's not, you guys. It is a much needed upgrade from the 2016 movie, and it really does a better job at kind of paying homage to the original while still being its own film, at least in the first half. The second half of the movie is where I think it kind of loses its way, unfortunately, and the heart and soul is stripped away from this film. Jason Reitman does a good job at separating the movie when he's dealing more so with the character moments, but when we get into this, I don't know, this big action visual effects showcase, it never really clicked for me. Were there some amazing performances here though? Yes, absolutely. Mckenna Grace, her performance is worth the price of admission alone. I mean, she just knocks it out of the park completely. One of the best performances of the year in a blockbuster film. Oh my gosh, she is just incredible. I cannot wait to see her in much more than this. But then you add on Logan Kim, Carrie, Coon, and even Paul Rudd, who we didn't talk about too much because, to be honest guys, his performance was good, but it didn't have as much staying power as the others. You can tell there were stretches of time, or maybe he had other filming conflicts because he just kind of disappears for long stretches in the second half. But hey, it is what it is. I still think he had one of the more fun times on set, and it did bleed through the screen, but I will say that overall the cast itself has some gems. It just doesn't necessarily come together at the end. Like I mentioned, Finn Wolfhard could have been probably better in this movie. I mean, I don't know, something just didn't work there. And then you have Celeste O'Connor, who was underused, and everyone else, they kind of fell off by the wayside, unfortunately. So this movie is okay. I'm in the middle for Ghostbusters Afterlife. I'm not exactly loving it, but I don't absolutely hate it either. So there you have it, you guys. That's my real review and all my thoughts on Ghostbusters Afterlife, which again hits theaters this weekend, but I need to know what you guys think of the film. So go ahead and get loud down below in the comments and let me know, did it work for you? Are you an even huge Ghostbusters fan? Did it make you happy? Did it make you sad? Again, I need to know your thoughts down below, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you are a big fan, of course, of Ghostbusters. Alrighty, y'all. Well, you know what? I'm gonna go and cancel this phone call. I guess I was making, or I'm on the call right now, actually, with Marooney. They use the Ghostbusters jingle, or at least it sounded like it. Alright, I gotta take this. Alright, again, thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll catch you at the next screening. Nope, I was trying to call the Ghostbusters. Yeah, I'm not trying to buy a car. Oh, great.